I want to recognize Representative Stevens. You have 5 minutes, ma'am.
Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. Thank you for the important hearing, and what a profound honor to be with you, distinguished colleagues, and this distinguished panel. I will tell you, in Michigan, we had more people die than were born last year, and we are continuing to roil from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and opioid epidemic and an overall labor shortage. And at the same time, we are hearing from our farms in Michigan about the absolute need to increase the workers through visa programs. And I have had this conversation. We've got Better Made Chips located in Detroit. I've had this conversation with their farms, and we are at a breaking point. And so while we look to meet the needs of the agricultural industry, I'd like to associate myself with the comments made in this hearing that we have an obligation to protect our children where they play, learn, work, period. We know that without basic child worker protections, child farm workers are particularly vulnerable to abuse and endangerment, and it's wholly unacceptable. So I'm so glad that we are convening today. Ms. Worth, I understand in the absence of strong federal labor protections for child farm workers, states and territories across the country have taken the initiative to implement their own standards and protections. And as the subcommittee chair for research and technology on House Science, another committee where we oversee the standards body and certainly see how labor standards play out here in this committee, can you expand on some examples from states or localities that have expanded protections for child farm workers and how they could serve as a model for federal protections?
Thank you so much for the question, Representative. And I would refer the committee members to an October 2021 report by Lawyers for Good Government and the Child Labor Coalition, which actually looked, state by state across the country, comparing state protections for child farm workers. They did find some good examples of positive practices. They found that 14 US states, as well as DC and Puerto Rico, have in fact raised the minimum age for agricultural work to 14. They also found that 15 states and Puerto Rico have limited the number of days each week that children can work in agriculture to 6 days a week, as opposed to the federal standards. Just to hone in on one state, the US state of Florida, obviously a very important agricultural state, has enacted both of those protections. So it has the minimum age of 14, the same as what the CARE Act would impose, and it limits the work of child farm workers under 16 to 6 days a week. States do have discretion and authority to do this. It's very important. But that said, these, state by state solutions are piecemeal. And you heard my colleague Norma talk about traveling from state to state with her family. If each state has different protections, children are not going to be protected in certain environments where they're working for. And that's why we strongly support what the CARE Act offers, which is nationwide protection for all children working in agriculture.
Well, and then Ms. Flores Lopez, you shared, your family's experience and the role that, this economic situation that people are in plays and influencing families to send their children to work, what, contributes to that. So how do unscrupulous agricultural employers exploit this economic reality when they employ child farm workers?
So as you heard from me, my parents and my grandparents, all of them US citizens, myself as well, we all were working out in agriculture, but it was the desperate poverty that drove us out there. And it was a generational cycle of poverty that we were stuck in. And so we had no access to said vocational training, to be able to have a protective training, to be able to have access to programs like 4-H or FFA. Those were none of the things that were reality for any of us. We were out there, and it was because we needed to be able to put food on our table. That desperate poverty is what a lot of those unscrupulous employers that are very much widespread across agriculture, which receives very little oversight, especially when you're out there working in rural communities where you're out of sight, out of mind. People don't understand what's really happening out there. And so what ends up happening is you have a vulnerable population that sometimes doesn't speak the language. The majority are undocumented, and they are in rural communities where they don't have a whole lot of resources. These are different situations that create very dangerous vulnerabilities for farm workers, especially children that, again, it's the desperate poverty and the lack of fair pay that really contributes and makes exploitation ripe in agriculture.
Well, thank you so much. And Madam Chair, I'm going to yield back.
Thank you. Thank you.